Well, guys, welcome for coming out to, microphone, Streaming Media West. Today we're going to talk about how big data can increase OTT ad revenue. We think it's really an important time and an interesting time in the online media space because things are changing. When more folks are using over-the-top television, how things are measured are changing this year. So we're really honored to have our panel members here. So just for us to get a sense of who's in the audience and the type of businesses you come from, just give me an idea. I mean, anyone can go. Give me an idea of the type of business that you're coming from. Is it broadcasters? Is it studios, telcos? Anyone? Yes, sir. Cable MSO. Cable MSO. Perfect. Anyone else? Come on, son. You can't be used. Broadcasters. Perfect. Ah, perfect. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. CDN, okay.
Broadcast products and services.
Broadcast products and services, okay. Any ad agency folks here? Anyone that sells to ad agencies? Broadcasters, of course. Okay. Got a good idea, guys?
Got it.
So we've got a great panel here with us today. We've got technologists. We've got folks from the ad agency business that actually spend money on broadcasters, so that's a good thing. Platform manufacturers or technology companies, and also data scientists that take a look at all this data and predict habits and things. So we're going to start off with the intros. I'm Steve Wong. I'm your moderator. I come from a company called Siemens. I have a background with ABC Broadcast, and I write screenplays and make movies too. So it's a little bit of both ends, and I started out actually in an agency, being a media buyer when I was going through college and beating up broadcasters and doing projections, so I sort of relate to that. So if we can go, we're not sitting in order, but we'll just go sort of what we have here. Andy, you want to do an intro on yourself?
Sure. My name's Andy Beach. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I work with a variety of the developers that are building the apps that folks are looking to monetize on.
Great. Jason?
Yeah. So I'm president of Noble People LA. We're a media agency based in New York and Los Angeles. I've been on the advertising and media side for about 15 years. Worked at Chiat/Day. I've worked at Wieden & Kennedy. We've got a team of about 35 people, represent about 15 clients, doing anything from small digital video buys up to Super Bowl buys this year.
Wow, expensive buys there at the Super Bowl too.
Valuable buys.
Valuable buys, that's right. Prospective buyers. Arnav, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Arnav. I'm a graduate student at University of Southern California, electrical engineer, and currently I'm working on a couple of data science and machine learning projects related to multimedia and advertisements.
And Dr. J.
My name is Jay Yogeshwar. I am the Director of Media Entertainment and Broadcast at Hitachi Data Systems. As they say, Director of Fun Stuff. But Hitachi itself is an enterprise IT company, and so we're sort of the arms dealer to media companies.
In a good way.
In a good way. But yeah, more importantly, I mean, we've seen a huge transition from bespoke appliances within the broadcast systems to cloud-based and analytics-based systems that are software-defined. So I'm experiencing part of that transition, and I want to share with you some of the learnings on how we're trying to implement media analytics on the types of enterprise IT infrastructures.
Okay, thanks. I think we hear a lot of things going on in the market about over-the-top television, and is it a new way people consume media? And if so, how do we build businesses around that? We'll take a look at some stuff here, some statistics from the market. One way is the Netflix model. People pay X amount per month. They get to watch all their movies they want. Netflix has a bunch of subscribers, multiplied by 8. That's your revenue stream. The other way is an ad-supported model, where someone watches something for free, sort of like broadcast television, and they have to, we have to pay for that, so they have to watch ads. So the big question in the market is, one, is that model that we used to have when I was at ABC, a broadcast model that's supported by ad revenue, is that sustainable by over-the-top television? And if so, at what rates? We used to call it, analog dollars for digital dimes. So the question is, what's happening? Is that a supportable model? So let's just jump down through some of the statistics here. So when we take a look at over-the-top television, when we look at a world, Siemens is a worldwide company, so when we look at the world, what's going on in OTT, we clearly see in North America is the way that's leading over-the-top television compared to the other regions. This is the most interesting point, and this is really the crux of what we're going to talk about today. We look at advertising, internet advertising overtaking TV advertising. This is the first year that really happened. So again, when we're thinking of cost per point delivery of broadcast TV versus internet television, this is where this balance starts to change, right? This is when over-the-top television business models that are ad-supported start to change and support themselves, which in the past never occurred. And again, we're going to get into this in a lot more detail. OTT app growth usage, you can take a look at what's happened in a very short period of time, 2014 to 2015. The use of OTT for apps for delivering videos, or TV apps like ABC, HBO Go, CBS mobile app. A game shift has changed, especially with HBO and CBS going direct to consumers. So discussion points. What are open platform for analytics? Because in the old days, we used to pull out, in the old days, Arbitron and Nielsen, we'd go and I'd go project a program, I'd give it to my sales guys and they'd go sell it. But today, what is that open platform for analytics? What do you guys see?
Yeah. Steve, I could talk to that. Today, you still have a big need to host your analytics on a platform because quick time to insight is really the key to market agility. You want to be able to perform data integration, you want to perform data discovery and predictive analytics very, very quickly on a platform that saves you time, that you do not have to go and manually figure out how to integrate your different components, how to batch ingest, how to stream ingest, and how to do all the real-time processing that's needed to go with the analytics. So essentially, if you're able to build a sort of a software-defined platform that can provision, that can monitor, secure the media analytics, and also do the troubleshooting, then you save the time frame to take an analytic idea, a concept, and actually monetize it becomes much shorter. So the goal really is to build a platform that any ad agency, for example, can run their software on and quickly gain very valuable insights.
Yeah. So from an agency standpoint, Honda comes to you, say they're your client, they say, look, here's $2 million for our fourth quarter buy.
Right.
And you've got, of course, you got Nielsen, right?
Yep.
But you want to provide them more than the other agencies. What sort of analytics are you guys looking at?
And there's not great analytics in the space right now, right? And so you look, you've got kind of Nielsen on the television side, you've got folks like ComScore that sit on the digital side. And again, both of these are kind of sampling methodologies. I think when you get into OTT, if they're not participating meaningfully in some sort of, again, open third-party system like that, then you've got to really take their numbers on at face value. And so you're seeing a lot of that. I don't think there isn't kind of a one-stop shop for us to be able to go for metrics. App Annie is another thing that we'll look at so we can understand kind of app downloads. But again, you're grabbing metrics from kind of disparate sources, and they're all based on a different sampling methodology. So it's really hard to go, oh, that actually does equate to what Nielsen would call a point, right? That those are apples to apples. So that's the difficult piece of this, right?
So your clients are coming to you, and they want justification of where you spent that $2 million. What's the process with all the new technologies that you have at your fingertips? What do you present to them?
There's a lot of different kind of tracking methodologies for video that we can use, right? But I think in terms of, I guess there's two pieces of it. There's what data I'm going to use to plan to make decisions of where I'm going to buy, and then there's what data I'm going to use to say that buy actually delivered. So in that sense, like Nielsen's got both of those things for us. I don't think you're seeing that, there is no kind of industry standard platform like that stretching across OTT. Some people participate in some things, some people participate in other things. But that's a super big challenge.
So Andy, you guys have access to tons of data, probably more than we want to feel comfortable with. So what do you see out there?
Well, yeah, right. So on acquiring the data side, right? There's definitely I think it's not that they're right. I think I agree that it's not that there's a uniform way of doing it, but there's
Right.
tons of data. And
Right.
so right now, because we're still evolving this, it's up to the company to sort of roll their own matrix for it. And so there are tools, online for doing some of that on, everybody's cloud platform of choices. On the Microsoft side, there's things like BI that basically just become giant dashboards. You can plug all the data into it that you want and start quickly sort of pulling out analysis.
Yeah.
And so that's the way we're doing it now, because there's not a way that anybody's identified as the way that everybody wants to do it moving forward. And I think it's probably another 4 or 5, maybe longer years before we consolidate down to a methodology that everybody can agree to.
Yep.
In terms of like where we're taking that data, though, I mean, I think particularly as we look at like the sort of the mobile usage side versus console or TV usage, we're getting tons of information not only from like how you access it, but like who's actually watching it, because you've got sampling data from things like the cameras that are in there that can be securely transferred in ways now. And so there's ways to parse that information, so you not only know who, like what they're doing while they're watching it, you actually know who may be watching it. And that's data that can also be rolled into it, and I think that pushes that value price up even more.
Yeah. Interesting. And Arnav, as a data scientist, you see a lot of tools out there that may be in other industries. How do you see those tools from other industries being used in predicting what someone may watch or someone may buy?
I completely agree with Andy that there's no standards for collecting the data, but there is no one good way to do it. But there are a lot of bad ways to do it, that if you do something and then your model doesn't work, it could be destructive to your business. As far as technology goes, you could use social platforms, you could use Facebook, Twitter, APIs to get users' information. You could scrape there's a company called GumGum that visits, sees all the web pages that a user visits, and using computer vision and image processing algorithms, they extract the information of the images that's on that pages. So there's a lot of models that you can use to extract any kind of information, but how you use that, I know that Hitachi has a great open platform for learning, that distributed computing, and how you use all that information to make a meaningful decision for your business, or monetizing the content, or delivering the advertisement. That's what really matters.
So, okay, to make everyone really nervous in the audience, if everyone opts in, so give us, can you really predict what someone's going to buy? Is there that much information out there, do you think, Arnav?
Definitely.
Wow.
Like I said, it's a digital world, and there's petabytes and terabytes of data just maybe relating to one person, or like a group of person, or a demographic of person. And the way you tap into that information really is all that matters. I actually met this company right now in the exhibits, Lift Igniter, and they are doing this in real time. And they're using all that cloud computing, AWS, and Scala, and all these machine learning tools to actually do this in real time.
Okay. And I think one of you guys may have heard of, there's one smart TV manufacturer, I forgot who it was, that was turning on cameras on the smart TVs just to, I don't know how they were using it. I'm sure it was opted in to record folks if they were watching or not. Actually, Nielsen sort of did this too and it wasn't the people meter, it was something else, just to determine who's in the audience, is it an adult or non-adult. Yeah. So the technology is there. How we use it for the good could help us justify higher costs, maybe. I don't know. For ads.
The costing is like a wide open issue. There's so much that impacts cost. I think like there's a rush in the advertising industry, has been for probably 4 or 5 years, to get really targeted with everything. I think we're starting to see the backlash of that a little bit, because I think there are things like scale that still matter. I think what happened in digital display around programmatic and machine learning left a lot of people not as satisfied.
Now, what do you mean by that? Give us an example.
Well, I just think, part of in this rush to, I think, have data to justify a higher CPM. So say I'm looking for people who are in market to buy an automobile. That you know, the folks who supply that data and these third parties who are doing this analysis to identify those people that are in market are incentivized to make those pools as large as possible. Because at the end of the day, automakers still have to sell a lot of cars, right? So it's great to say like, oh, I'm absolutely sure one person's going to buy a car, but I've got to sell a million of those. And so I think there are a lot of people who exhibit characteristics, you know, within a given, you know, purchase pattern, if you will, and you can say that that's them. I don't think it represents the market. And a lot of this depends on the product too. So what you'd have is you'd have data vendors who are saying, okay, well, I've invented this algorithm to say these are people who are in market in auto, and they're incentivized to make that pool as large as possible to then sell that back to, say, a Yahoo who's going to sell it to me. And so a lot of that third-party data and the kind of like, you know, sizing up of those databases, I think contributed to poor results, right? So then you start to see things where the premium that I paid for targeting those ads to automakers versus whether I had just blasted something out cheap, right? The premium I paid for targeting didn't actually, you know, pay out in the term. So it would have been cheaper for me just to have all the waste inherent in a mass buy.
It's almost like the
on
old
an
model,
ROI basis.
direct, you know, mail versus a broadcast buy.
Yeah, I mean, there's the same kind of targeting. Like we've done these experiments in direct mail. We've done it really in any medium. Is that premium of targeting actually worth it in terms of what your business result's going to be? And I think a lot of that depends on the product. I think it's really different for Rolex than it is for mac and cheese. A lot of people buy mac and cheese. I don't need predictive behavior to know who's going to buy mac and cheese. Like it's pretty much almost everyone in America. So I'm going to focus on different kinds of buys. So I think a lot of it depends on the product that you're in. You know, travel's like a really interesting space, right? Because there's time elements. So I have a rental car client, so data becomes really valuable around, I know someone booked an airline ticket within a week. Like, I think there are scenarios you get into that you go, okay, that is actually valuable data. And then you find the buyer, you know, if you're a seller of that media inventory or that data, then you find the kind of right buyer for that. But I don't think it's, you know, I don't think the answer is everything's
It's not overall
targeted across the board. Yeah.
Interesting. So with Google open source TensorFlow libraries for machine learning, how would it affect the industry? I mean, what do you guys think?
I have a problem with this, that it's kind of every 2 years or every few years, someone comes out with a new library or some new technology and everyone's running towards that. It started in 1990s with support vector machines, and then it moved on to neural networks, and then it moved on to artificial intelligence, and then a lot of machine learning with distributed computing, machine learning training models came in, and we're back on machine learning. So there's like we've been discussing, there's no real standard that we can use to make models and deliver advertisements or targeted advertisements. So it's really cute that Google released their this TensorFlow, and I did check it out, and it's open source, so we'll see how that goes with how the engineers use it and if it would be successful. It's been successful for Google, but how now that they have open sourced it, how successful it would be for other people.
Any other comments?
Well, I think technologies such as TensorFlow or machine learning and content analytics, as they say, they've been around in a cyclical way and available, but very few have been actually able to exploit these things. One great example was, I think, Digital Smiths that managed to really focus in on the commercial aspect of content analytics, and I think that a few years ago they got bought by TiVo, and they used it for a very, very specific purpose of recommendation engines and content personalization. So I think as long as you have a very specific area in mind and you're able to apply that in a clever way, then you can be successful. Otherwise, it's just another tool in your toolbox.
There's no one tool for everything, right?
Absolutely.
Interesting. And again, it comes back to standards, right? I mean, where do these standards, how do you create these? What is the organization that's going to create these standards, right?
Yep.
So with data science technology changing every 3 years, what new language should a company select? If we're putting together an OTT system and we want to have data science tied with it, what do you guys think? Do you select one or?
Well, there are plenty of options. You could do Python, which is again open source. It has a lot of libraries that many data science companies are using. That's scikit-learn, which is machine learning library. Then there's standard scientific Python and SciPy and NumPy, which is scientific and numerical Python libraries. There's TensorFlow now that Google has released it, and then a lot of natural language processing work is done in Scala, and of course you can to make that real time. You have a lot of data. You can use distributed computing system like Hadoop, and if you want it, maybe you can have it on your own servers, or you can do it on cloud. On AWS or any cloud service. So it's completely autonomous, like as in what do you want, how much do you want to spend on this. You can like cherry pick your options, which language to use, whether or not to use distributed computing, whether you want it on real time or not. So it's really how much budget you have and how much you are willing to spend on this.
So Andy, what do you think? I know you have an opinion, so.
I was going to mention Azure. If you haven't looked at the
Of course.
machine learning on Azure, maybe check that out.
I'm actually doing a course, Microsoft course on Azure. It's on edX.
Excellent. Yep. So yeah, the machine learning has been definitely been a big area on the Azure platform over the last year. Refining, using, particularly around how they can start using some of those capabilities and tie it into, I don't know if you've looked into, this is not strictly in the data science realm of it, but using some of those same algorithms to create something called Project Oxford, which is out there now, which starts pulling in things like the ability to transcribe the text contextually, so based on all of the information you're getting, making decisions around the words and what they mean, so that you've got more accurate items to search, but also some image processing, so being able to detect not only whether there are people in the shot, but also like the sentiment of the people that are in the shot, things like that. So being able to sort of pull in and make sort of calculated decisions around that it's been pretty interesting to watch how rapidly it's evolved, because it was pretty cool like a year ago when I started first playing with some of it, and the more people who use it, the more refined all of those programs become, and the more accurate they all become. It's all that stuff that they kind of made a splash with it like a year ago. Guess my age. Yeah. And it was really bad when it first started, because it was like basically if you had a beard, it added 15 years to your age, and it's actually gotten much better at those capabilities now, and that's really just kind of scratching the surface of what you can do with some of that.
But a lot of this stuff, although it's new to the media, it's not new to medical science. It's not new to the securities. I mean, not in my division, but Siemens has, software that helps protect nations. Again, not in my division. So the technology is there, right?
Right. So I mean, from an infrastructure hardware company, I can say that we do have to support all kinds of open source on our platforms. So whether that's Hadoop or any other OpenStack type of technologies, we have to make sure that they run on our platforms without any changes. So we natively support OpenStack APIs, for example, to be able to run NoSQL or Hadoop or those kinds of processing.
So I remember, again, way back when I was at an agency, when we used to do stuff, besides in Nielsen, we'd use, Birch or some other things, or we'd have, in-house, like when we were looking for talent, we'd bring about 10 people in a room, we'd say, run some tapes and say, oh, what do you think of this news anchor versus this news anchor? Which one do you like better? And that's how we'd hire it. Small sample, or we'd subscribe to another service that would go out in the market and do a survey. Of course, it would never be real time. You'd buy it, by the year or the quarter, whatever. What do you see out there? When guys are coming to sell you this new technology, what do you see that's different than when I was in the agency business like 400 years ago?
Not a whole lot.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, when you really strip it down, I mean, I think we'll talk about that stuff. There's an incredible amount to measure. I think Andy said it. Like there's almost too much data. So there's always, there's still sales guys. So they're gonna pick the best data that they have.
Yeah.
So we don't get to terribly often exposed to what languages we're building these sorts of things in. I built a copy testing tool and used some Python stuff, but it's not machine learning or any of those sorts of things. So we get a little bit of exposure to that. But a lot of this work's still done in Excel. Like it still needs to be able to fit on a Keynote slide. I still need to be able to get a CMO to understand it in about 45 seconds. So belaboring this thing and trying to do multiple pivots isn't going to work for our business. Like we've still got to get it down to some common metrics. And I think that's when we talk about these data platforms. It's like definitions, I think, are the biggest piece in our business. Because if we have all clear definitions of what it actually means when somebody's viewing it, like is that one person in the room, is that two person in the room, is that somebody went to the bathroom, is that it just started to play on Facebook, is that, what are those definitions? And I think it makes our job easier because we can do those like apples to apples comparisons in Excel.
Interesting. So when your clients are coming to you, the vice president of marketing, the chief marketing officer at a car company or an airlines,
Yep.
How sophisticated are these guys? What do they expect? I mean, their kids have iPads, they've got the phones, and they're seeing things. I mean, what are they asking
I think they're
you?
remarkably sophisticated about their business, right? And so they've hired, whether it's consultants or have in-house, analysts to do, really robust segmentations and all these sorts of things. So I think they're really, really wise to that. But I don't think, they could explain the difference between Hadoop and, Azure.
They just want to know the number.
Hadoop's on Azure. So.
Right. So
makes
they're the
life
same.
easier.
So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a different level of sophistication and it's a different area of focus, But I think it's everyone's trying to understand what this means and what it means to their business and try to get some common definitions and these sorts of things. I think everyone's certainly sophisticated enough at this point to not just chase data for data's sake, right? To really start to kind of peel that back. And I think, digital media's had a lot to do with that in terms of, there's plenty of hucksterism and the things that were sold in early days of digital media that I think have made everyone in the marketing industry just aware of that. I need to know the definition on that. I need to know the source of that. I need to know scale of that. Those sorts of things. So.
Interesting. So what are open platform analytics? What do you guys, how do you define what that is? Sorry. After you hit 50 things, repeat. So the ROI, how's that been affected by companies using data science and trying to monetize their content? Trying to sell to guys like this. How do they get a higher rate? What do you guys see out there?
Tell me.
Well, I guess from a media perspective or a content owner perspective, there's two areas that you want to improve in terms of the quality of experience of your viewers. One is, how do you optimize your content so that it can be discovered? And then the second is how do you personalize the content so you combine the discovery with the user behavior and you do targeted content. So you could sell more premium content to that person or SVOD or sell-through. So, just as ROI is measured today in terms of ARPU, in terms of churn rate, I mean, are you reducing the amount of churn? Are you getting more per user? I think those metrics still count today in terms of ROI. If your analytics process can improve the quality of experience or the quality of service, that directly results in reduced churn, I think you've got your investment return.
Andy, I mean, you're deeply involved with this. What do you see?
I think it was interesting that you talked about discoverability because I think that's sort of and that came up in our last panel, Steve, where that's such a big part of this is like getting not only finding the data, but then finding ways to surface to the user is like the big open challenge in digital media now. Like we all knew how it worked in television, like that's
Flip
a
the
very
channel,
known,
right?
simple, right? It's like a super easy like quantity, and it's so easy to get lost right now in that fragmentation as we have all the different screens, all the different devices, all the different apps in those devices. So that, which is causing all of that data that we're trying to get, but surfacing it back or finding the ways to apply that back to the end user so that they're getting the things that they want. It's like the big challenge in the area right now.
So what do you see? Do you think that's more of a recommendation engine, Andy, or do you think that's learning about that viewer? Or is
Yeah,
it a
it's-
marketing thing?
It's definitely, I mean, recommendation is part of it, and then it's almost like I wish I had the money to go just do a startup right now with this, because I think this
Well, you
is like
could.
the
I
hot
think we've
area.
got some VCs in the room.
That's right. But it's sort of part recommendation, part curation, and then it's the model, right? You've got to almost be flexible enough in the way you're presenting it, because there are going to be some people that are totally happy to have it ad supported. Then you've got to cater to the people who are perfectly happy to pay extra and do away with the ads. But Hulu right now, I think, is probably doing it extremely well, and hopefully that their new tier of service has proven to be profitable for them. But I think it's getting positive results, and I think it's probably helping with their subscriber base too.
I think it's going to be almost a combination, right?
Yeah,
Where
it's not
you
one or
can't
the other.
have one or the other, right?
It's a balance, and I think the balance is constantly changing, and you got to be flexible enough to sort of meet the needs of that and move, because it's gonna sort of swing back and forth, right? You're gonna go through heavy subscriber periods, then that's gonna drop off, and you've got to be ready to meet with the advertising side of that to compensate for it. So it's a balancing act.
Interesting. So from an agency side, I just want to get your perspective. Would your guys rather have a pre-roll of a show, or would they rather be product placed in that show? A little bit off subject, but still,
Yeah.
it's marketing dollars, right?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. I know that's like a generic answer, but
Yeah.
Certain things are best treated when I need to explain it, right? I need that 30 seconds to be able to kind of take you on a journey. Other things are, hey, I just need to have this brand visible in your life, and we're playing a repetition game. You're going to buy insurance every 5 years, but Geico's on top of you constantly, right? So that when you make that decision, they're top of mind. So it's just where the brand is at. I think in general, like, all advertisers want to feel like they're in more premium places and they're in bigger places. Yeah. So it's also going to depend on the nuance of how you're integrated into that show, right? If you become, co-star of that show, then that's really different.
Like the old soap operas, right? It would be that that manufacturer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it's interesting to me, like, just the talking about ROI, that is, it's focused on like discovery and recommendation, which is like antithetical to the conversation, right? Because you're saying like, well, how is big data going to increase ad revenue? How's it going to increase cost per point? The unit price by which I'm selling advertising, but then the ROI conversation is like, how am I going to get more people watching? Which is just, that's the classic advertising metric, right? It is just eyeballs in and of itself. And I think that's the hurdle we need to cross first before we start getting into, well, we're going to triple the price on the CPM. You're going to have to go a long way on the CPM to make up for the delta between, the cost model of cable and the cost model of Netflix, right? So I don't know that CPM's ever going to really cut that.
Interesting.
It's a huge delta.
So you just
Scales
need more eyeballs.
More eyeballs solves it, I think, is easier, certainly, than more targeting.
So the question is, are those eyeballs equal? When you see an eyeball, not see an eyeball, but advertisingly see an eyeball on broadcast television, see an eyeball on cable, or see an eyeball on something like a Netflix if they accepted advertising, is that equal to you as a buyer of advertising?
No, I mean, there's certainly demographic differences in those audiences. There is this kind of squishy equation of context, right? And so, like, there's things like late night might be really great and it works, but like there's certain brands where like I'm not going to be in late night TV. Like it's going to erode at the premiumness of my brand. So there's a lot of nuance to those decisions.
But if the time frame, if we can say these are equal time frames.
Time frame, demographic, kind of all the same. It's a tough question. I want to say yes, although I could imagine there'd be scenarios where you'd say no. But I'd say more often, yeah, it's spot. Like, and I think we're doing a lot of experiments where we're doing digital video buys against television buys, right? To really say like are these actually similar? If you measure them the same, the exact same weights, these sorts of things, can you accomplish? And I run digital video in one city and I run television in another city. Like what does that look like? And so I think we're trying to move in that direction.
But if we take the numbers out of it, which it's tough because it's a numbers game, right? I mean, in the mindset of a media buyer, do they see, well, network television, that's more eloquent, so I'm willing to pay more, as opposed to someone on an iPhone? Does that come into play at all, or is it just a really pure numbers game?
I think it's a pure numbers game.
Interesting.
Again, as much as it's like, that's a real person, that that
Yeah.
that's how they consume media, that they actually are paying attention to their iPhone. And I think, that's a shift in this business. I think there definitely was like an older predisposition to like, no, it's got to feel big, and we got to be on network. Well, ratings aren't there on network. So sometimes you're pulling together a cable buy anyway. So I think like that was the first thing to go, like the stigma of cable, right? And then now you're saying like, well, the digital video, like, no, digital video can be just as premium as anything else. This, OTT inventory that I'm buying is just as premium as anything else. So yeah, in that sense, the eyeball is kind of the eyeball, 95%.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, content discovery can actually lead to more eyeballs.
Right.
And there's a couple of success stories out of Europe, both Orange and the Portuguese Zon. It's a multi-screen service that they introduced called Iris. So what they did was they targeted social interaction. So your friends would recommend a certain program that they saw and they liked. And so you would never have seen that program unless if it was your friend that saw it and recommend that to you. So as a result of that, they were able to get more eyeballs and actually pretty successful in getting more revenue out of the same content that they had previously distributed through the cable service. Right? So through the multi-screen service, they were able to monetize it better.
Interesting. I gotta tell you, I remember when I was with ABC back in the 90s, right? I took our 5 p.m. news and I streamed it live through See You, See Me. It was like a million years ago. I think 5 people saw it. And then I got a note from my GM at the station. He said, stop wasting your time with the internet. It's a fad. Right. So obviously not a fad anymore. He's retired with a ton of, in those days, Cap City stock, so he's so happy.
Oh, wow.
Got a few minutes left, but so what are the various functional components? What is the end result of the output?
Oh, well, I think in the end, I'd like to put the analytics into 3 buckets. How does it improve the quality of service associated with your, say, OTT offering, for example? Because the better the service, less buffering and less of the jitter and those kinds of issues, then of course people are going to stick longer, and the quality, of course. And so the quality of service is key. So if analytics improves that, I think you've gone a long way. Quality of experience, which I earlier mentioned about content optimization, content personalization. And then finally, it's about content monetization through ad analytics. So really, that is the end result of anything that you do. I mean, if you're not able to improve those 3 buckets, then all the data science and data analytics that you've done has not been of much effect.
Makes sense. And I think you said also, for you to take action on it, to hand to your clients, you have to have something usable that they can understand and measurable.
Yeah, measurable, and I think, as much as possible from a third party, right? I mean, I think so much of our business is transacted off of those third party numbers, and like, this is a space where there's not a lot of them, and so that's stopping the flow of dollars into this space in a really big way.
Well, that's a question. I mean, if you're getting these numbers from the guy that's playing the video, is that less credible from you than a third party that's providing this information?
I think it's the question of whether I'm going to get it. That's where I go back into like the question of what I'm going to buy versus then how I'm going to measure it. So like I can gather data out of any integration that I'm doing inside of an app, and I know that this thing's pinged my server X number of times, and so that must mean that X number of people or pings were there, right? Depending on what it is. So yeah, I think you can get that, but it's, no one wants to be the guy that recommends a thing that fails. So if the sales guy's telling me like, oh, we're gonna have 1 million views, and that's based on his own data or some cut of a data that I'm not seeing, and we get into the thing and it's got 100,000 views, it's still the best performing thing ever, but I look like an idiot. So, I think that's where the third party thing needs to come in. It's that upfront and opening the door to those conversations. Less so like, is it measurable on the back end? Because I think we're really good. I mean, we've been using simple regression analysis in TV and radio for a really long time. So it's just time-based regression models. We don't have to get super fancy to know that something must have happened, right? We're seeing more sales, and so you can attribute that. And is it perfect? No, but advertising kind of never was anyways. And so it's okay. But I think it's that opening the door and starting a conversation and be like, this is something I should look at. Because I think media buyers are then, just predisposed to look at like, what are the biggest apps? Like, what are the biggest things that I can do? And maybe miss some opportunities where, like, I think the podcast space is really interesting right now, like what they're doing in advertising, like accepting one advertiser, getting really that advertiser really integrated in a show. And like the advertisers that I see doing podcasts are really loving it. But it feels undiscovered, and it's another space where like there's not really good metrics. Like you got PodTrack kind of trying to figure that out. And so like we need a little, maybe a PodTrack in this space, or I know Nielsen is maybe going to be involved in this or not, but maybe it's good. But like maybe they should do that, maybe.
Interesting. So, Andy?
Yeah, I totally agree about the on the podcasting side. Like it's sort of this like greenfield space that, you know, it did exist. It was radio basically,
right.
and but now it's not. But it is where there's like some really interesting experiments in the advertising model that's going on, and it would be great to sort of see that make a jump back into more traditional video.
Yeah.
OTT.
Totally.
Cool. Arnav?
Yeah, just quickly summarizing all 3 quick points that any OTT service needs to do is, one, get consumers, make users sign up for your service, retain them. That's completely subjective, that because it depends on the quality of content that you stream. And then if you want to go down that road, advertisements. And for all these 3 things, data science can help. So hire more engineers, hire more data scientists. We're good at what we do.
Especially from USC, right?
Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to repeat the question so we can record it. Yes, sir.
For each of you, if you were to mentor and advise somebody new to the space, a broadcaster, paid TV operator, PR, agency, whatever, and you were to want to tell them the #1 lesson that they should practice as they get into the data analytics space in media, entertainment, and telecom, what would that #1 lesson be?
So let me repeat that, guys. So the question is, if you were to mentor someone getting into the data analysis space with big data, and you were to advise them, what would that advice be? You want to start it down the line, Jay?
Sure. So I think data analytics or data science has got a lot of promise, but the very first step is you want to make sure that the data that you get is clean, that it's been culled, and that you're not dealing with noise or spurious information. So that's very important just to get started. And then there's a lot of ways in which steps in between to go from collecting that data to actual monetization. So I would suggest have the end goal in mind first before you start to process your data.
Makes sense.
Beware of spurious correlations.
That's right. Bad data.
I remember like in early days of Facebook, they came out a study with Starbucks, and it was about the people who like Starbucks on Facebook buy more coffee at Starbucks. And it was kind of presented as a thing of like that was a result of them liking Starbucks on Facebook, but in reality it was like completely the other way around. So it was like people who buy a lot of Starbucks also take the time to like Starbucks on Facebook. So just be really cautious, I think, when you're talking to, especially if you're selling media, like what kind of conclusions you're drawing from the data you're looking at.
Interesting. Andy?
Definitely start with an assumption and then be ready to be wrong. No, don't let the data pile up. Don't keep shaping the data to prove that you're right. Have an assumption, start looking into it, and then if you're wrong, be ready to make a change.
People behave strangely.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Arnav?
I completely agree with Andy. I read this somewhere that the best time to apply machine learning to your product was 5 years ago or right now. So it's really an experimental field, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong and do go wrong. So yeah, but we got to keep trying.
Makes sense. Any questions from the audience?
And repetition of advertising, which is quite infuriating.
Okay, let me summarize again. I feel like a translator here. So again, we've got tons of information about what people like and what they may buy. So how far away are we of actually sending relevant, important ads to someone and not repeating it? I gotta say, when I was at the station placing our own promotional ads, I annoyed the hell out of folks because I would repeat our promos for 5 and 10 p.m. news intentionally. We got higher ratings, but
Well, from a manufacturer point of view, I can say that content analytics have come a long way. So you can actually get very, very good detailed semantic descriptions of scenes and the content. So now the question is, how do you apply ad placement technology to the metadata that's been collected about the content? So I think that's up to folks like you to figure out and see if that's going to be appropriate or if it's going to be backlash from the consumers.
Yeah. I think that it's just an economic question of how much is the waste worth or not worth, like the value of that waste, right? I don't envision a utopia where I think everyone's going to love every ad, because even an ad that's perfectly targeted could just be a really shitty ad. So it's still going to annoy people. So like it's less of a problem I think we're trying to solve, you know?
So machine learning won't fix a shitty ad.
Yeah, no. It actually makes them worse.
Right, right. Teaches them how to be more.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think just even as a viewer of OTT stuff, the like lack of variety of ads becomes the harbinger of like that's the part I'm also waiting on, is like we just need people spending more money in the space so that there's a wider variety of them, because I can't see the same Travelocity ad 6 more times.
Yeah.
Arnav?
Yeah, speaking from mathematical point of view, there are a lot of things. There are hundreds and thousands of models that you can train and apply. So there you could use logistic regressions. You could use maybe clustering, which is maybe less compute exhaustive. But it really depends on how much data that you have. Even like 10,000 samples might not be good enough to deliver perfect content or perfect advertisement. It might repeat or it may not repeat. So it really depends on how good your model is and how much data you have to deliver a perfect advertisement.
Great. Guys, we're a minute over, so I want to thank you very much for coming out. Our panelists are going to be out in the hallway to answer any of your questions. And thank you so much, folks, for coming out. I think we had a great diversified panel. So again, thank our panelists. Thank you very much.